Thanks everybody for coming. This is ClearBlade's ClearLab series, session 5, deploying the ClearBlade Edge. My name is Akash Sharma. I'm an IoT solutions engineer with ClearBlade. We're a company that helps developers build IoT solutions. A couple of things about this session before I get started. First of all, I'll be using a Ubuntu machine during this session. And if you're a Ubuntu or Linux user or a Mac user, you're going to be comfortable with most of the tasks that I undertake during this session. If you're a Windows user and you're used to using Linux virtual machines or something like a Raspberry Pi, then you're used to using an application called PuTTY, and you'll be comfortable with the steps I take as well. And if you're a Windows user who has used the Windows subsystem for Linux, you're going to be fine with all the steps that I take as well. If you're a Windows user that's new to Linux, or you're not familiar with the Windows subsystem for Linux, then be aware that I have recorded a video version of this session where I do use a Windows machine and I do use the Windows subsystem for Linux, and that video will be posted shortly after this session, and maybe that's something that you want to go and take a look at. You're absolutely welcome to stay through this and maybe look at that one as well. Another thing I'll mention, I'd like everyone to find the email that invited you to this session. At the bottom of that email, you'll see a button with the words "Learn More." If you click that button, it brings up a page that has some content we're going to use during the session. So find the email that invited you, click the Learn More link, and leave that open in a browser tab. We're going to use that as we go through today. We'll talk about the project we've been working on, go through our guided development, and during the question and answer session, a few minutes at the end, I will allow you to unmute yourselves and we can have questions and answers. A couple of terms I'm going to use today. First of all, when I say gateway device, I'm talking about a small limited resource computer, something like a Raspberry Pi, which is often used for industrial applications. And we're going to deploy our ClearBlade Edge on something like that. Today, we're going to use our computers, but it could absolutely be one of those. When I say platform, I'm talking about our environment in the cloud, which is the home where our IoT systems reside. And when I say edge, I'm referring to the environment on the gateway device. Now let's talk about what we've done over the last few sessions. We've built a system that acquired, stored, and displayed temperature data. We always said that the end goal was to have that temperature data originate from some temperature sensor mounted to some asset that was important for our business. The temperature sensor would be connected to the analog input of a gateway device. That gateway device would be running some code written in some common language, Python or Golang or Node or something like that, providing that temperature data up to our system running within our platform, so in the cloud. And there our system would receive that data, store it, and display it, analyze it, all those things. Now last session, we took a big step towards that goal when we wrote some Python code that ran external to our system, but it connected to the MQTT broker within our system as an MQTT client, published the temperature data to an MQTT topic, and then within our system, we had a stream service that received that data, stored it, and we displayed that data in a portal. Now that Python code ran on our computers last session, but it could very well have run on a gateway device like a Raspberry Pi. No reason that should not have been possible. As long as an internet connection was maintained between wherever the Python code was running and the MQTT broker within our system in the cloud, then everything would have been fine last session. But if that internet connection were to ever go down, which is very much something that happens with internet connections, then what would have happened? Our Python code would have probably crashed, and at best case, we would have lost some data. And worst case, if that Python code controlled some equipment, we could have had a catastrophic failure. Now, it depends on our circumstances, but we may be less tolerant to those kinds of disconnections. And that's where we need some way to mitigate for those disconnections. That's where we need our gateway device to be more than just something that relays data back and forth. We need it to be an edge. An edge is something that runs autonomously, whether there's a connection to a system in the cloud or not, such that whatever code is running on that device, Python or whatever it is, stays satisfied and everything continues working robustly. ClearBlade provides an edge application that makes it possible to create one of these edge devices very easily. Here's a definition of the ClearBlade Edge from our docs. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm going to read parts of it that are important. The ClearBlade Edge is an application to synchronize, configure, manage, and deploy IoT systems. So it is an application. It is software that we will install and run on our gateway device. It is designed to perform well on a constrained hardware platform, something like a Raspberry Pi. And the ClearBlade Edge contains all the same features as the ClearBlade platform. You'll see that today. When we look at the ClearBlade platform, you'll see the components that are used to make a system. You'll see those same components are available to you on the edge as well. So by the end of today, we will have deployed an edge. In the process of doing that, we would have created what's called a deployment. You'll understand what that means when we build it. And we would have deployed an adapter. What that is essentially the Python code that we used last session. We're going to deploy it in such a way that it runs on the gateway device, but it stays intimately connected to our edge. Traditionally, when we use the term adapter within ClearBlade, we're talking about some code running on our edge device next to our edge, and that does some kind of protocol translation, converts Bluetooth data to MQTT, or Modbus data to MQTT, or something like that. Well, our Python code kind of fits the bill. It takes temperature data and publishes it to MQTT, so that'll be a good start to an adapter. So at the end of today, we will have deployed an edge, we would have created one deployment, and we would have deployed one adapter. With all that said, I'd like you to go to that page that you opened up and find the link to the MQTT client user device underscore S5 for session 5.py Python file. Right click, open that in a new tab. We'll use that shortly. Then I'd like you to open another tab and go to platform.clearblade.com. Platform.clearblade.com. We're looking at our cloud environment, and log in. If you need to register, you don't need the first item. The registration key is not necessary, but you need everything else. Submit, agree to some terms and conditions, and you can log in. And if you have your existing temperature monitor system here, and it is fully built through the end of session 4, feel free to continue using that. If it is built until some time before the end of session 4, then it is incomplete. I would go into that one, rename it to temperature monitor in progress or something like that. And I would start with the completed version of the system from session 4. From the same page, there's a link to the zip file. Click to download it. Go back to your console home. Click Add System. From a file, browse to wherever you had that zip file downloaded. No need to extract the contents. Just pick the whole zip file and let it go up into the environment. And now you have your system as it was at the end of session 4. Couple of preliminaries. Go to users. This is the dummy user we provided for you to log into your portal. Click on the gear icon, settings, change password, put in a password that you would remember. And while you're here, I'd like you to go to the devices page. And we have this device 1. We are going to need it, but I want you to select it and delete one row, confirm. We're going to recreate that device as we start working with our Python code. Next, I'd like you to go to the portals page, temperature monitor portal, click on that. You are going to need to log in with that dummy email address in our system. Log in. We're not going to change our portal at all. All you need to do here is to click this eye symbol, the preview icon. Click that, and now our portal is ready to use, and you'll see data flowing in by the end of this session. Now, I want you to go back to this tab where you're looking at your platform. So it's a console window looking at your platform. I want you to right-click there and duplicate, so that what we're going to do is use one of these to look at our platform, and we're going to use the other one to look at our edge. Okay, great. At this point, I'd like you to go to your tab where you opened up your Python file, Control A to select all, Control C, and I'd like you to then go to your favorite code editor and create a new file, paste that Python code, save the file. It doesn't really matter where you save it. it probably doesn't matter what the name is as well, but I'm going to use this name, temperature adapter.py, and if you use that name, I will explain, you'll understand where it comes from shortly. Now, if you were to look at this file, you'll see that it is essentially the same Python file we used last session with a few changes. And as I mentioned, we're going to use this as our adapter. Now, some of these things are common to last time, so let's go ahead and set it up. So you can close this tab where you got the Python file from. And first thing we need is our system key. You can go to your system home, click on the gear icon, scroll all the way to the bottom, copy your system key, paste it, copy your system secret, paste it, and Control S to save. And with the system key, the system secret, and the URL, then you have initialized the system object, which is essentially the connection between our adapter and the system. But now we're going to notice one of the differences from last session. Last session, your URL was https platform.clearblade.com. This time it is http 127.0.0.1 port 9000. Why this IP address? It's because 127.0.0.1 means local host. So let's remember, this adapter is going to be running on your gateway device, but the edge is also going to be running on your gateway device. Part of that edge is your system, and so your adapter is going to connect to your system on the same machine, on the local host. And our edge is going to be listening on port 9000. That's where this comes from. Now, it is HTTP and not HTTPS. Let me mention a couple of reasons why this is unencrypted communication. One, for this to be encrypted communication, this has to be a domain name. It cannot be an IP address. But to create a domain name, somewhere someone needs to create an A record and register that with a domain name service. Most likely, this edge has been installed in under some domain that ClearBlade has no control over. So someone else needs to create that mapping or that A record, and they absolutely could do that. And then this would be a domain name rather than an IP address, and that is absolutely fine. And whoever is responsible for maintaining that domain would also need to create a TLS cert and a TLS key, and then this could absolutely be HTTPS and some domain URL, and that would be fine. But that's a lot of work that we're not going to go through today. Now, I'd like you to go to devices. Oh, I do want to mention that the fact that it's unencrypted communication is less of a concern because, as I said, this is running on a certain device and the edge is running on the same device, so the communication never goes across a network. Now, I'd like you to go to devices, add device, name the device device-1, the same as here. Copy this active key from here, overwrite this guy, save it, create. He is of role authenticated. Great. Now our Python file is ready to go. Let me point out the second difference from last session. This MQTT client object that gets created by running this messaging init function, it is created with a different port from last session. Last session it was 1884, and this is 1883. 1884 is for encrypted traffic and 1883 for unencrypted. That's why here we say use TLS equals false, as opposed to last session we said use TLS equals true. And once again, the URL is localhost and not platform.clearblade.com. Okay, so great. Our Python code is ready to deploy as an adapter. So the next thing we'll do is go to your console home, go to adapters, and add an adapter. Call it temperature adapter. Now you understand this name. This is going to be an adapter. Now, before you create, we need to choose our architecture. Where is this going to be running? If you're going to run this in a terminal on a Mac machine, then you would pick Darwin OS X. If you're going to run it on a terminal on a Linux machine, obviously there's all these different flavors of Linux running on all these different processors. If it's going to be running on something like a Raspberry Pi, then probably you're going to pick Linux ARM v7 32-bit. But if it's not that, we need to kind of find out. So I'm going to find that out on my machine. I'm going to go to a terminal. And if you have a Linux terminal, you can do this with me. Type in uname-a. And that tells me the flavor of Linux I have, and it tells me something about the operating system the processor I'm running on, and that might be all I need to know. Let me type that again. So there it is, x86-64. If this doesn't give me enough information, I can actually do the following. I can cat/etc/os-release, and that gives me further information about my OS, if that was needed. And if I wanted to know more about my processor, I can say cat/pros CPU info. I'm not going to hit enter because that actually spits a lot of information back that I don't really need, but you might need it. But for me, this is all I need. It's Linux running on x86-64. So that's what I'm going to pick, Linux x86-64. I'm going to click create. Now I'm going to go and configure the adapter just a little bit. There's a ton I can do in here, but I'm just going to start off by doing a little bit. So go into the adapter, ignore everything down here. Just go to setup adapter configuration, click on import files, point to that Python file that you just created. And then if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see that it is showing up at the bottom as an additional file. Click update adapter. Great. Now our adapter is ready to deploy to an edge. Do I have an edge yet? I don't. So I need to go here to edges. Go there. Let's add an edge. Add edge. Let's call it first edge. This is going to be our first edge, of course. Create. And right here, you see that there is no edge connected. Well, obviously, this terminal on the right is what I'm going to turn into my edge, but I haven't done it yet. To do so, I need to go to setup instructions. And again, it's asking me where is the edge going to run? Target. I pick Linux x86-64. If you're using a Mac OS machine, pick that. If you're using Raspberry Pi, pick that. If you're using the Windows subsystem for Linux, you would probably pick that first one as I did as well. Okay. Now down here, I've got some choices on what I can install. Either I can install the Edge or the Edge Plus console. I'm just going to choose Edge. Let me explain what the console is. The console is a light version of what I see when I log into platform.clearblade.com, except I would point my browser at the gateway device where the console would be running a web server. One of the reasons I don't want the console is because I would only use that from a web browser that's actually running on that same machine, which I could have. I could have a Raspberry Pi running a desktop environment. I could have a browser, and then I could use that browser to connect to the console. And that would be fine. But if I was to use my browser here to connect to the console, I would have to log in with a username and password. And then the fact that this is all unencrypted communication does matter. The last thing I want is to send a password over an unencrypted channel. So I'm just going to install the Edge. So I'm going to copy this command and I'm going to paste it here. So everybody, if you haven't done so, open up a terminal. Hopefully go into an empty directory that you make, or if not, you can just install straight in the terminal. Just be aware that some files are going to get installed there. And then paste your install command. You might right click, you might control V, you might control shift V, enter. And then once that's done, we need to start it up. So here's the startup command. Copy the Edge startup command, paste it, enter, and you're going to see a bunch of stuff happens. And the moment this ClearBlade ASCII art icon shows up, then I know I have my Edge running. Then what I do is I go here, refresh, and I should see a checkbox telling me the Edge is connected. Now I do need to leave this terminal open and running. If I close it, the Edge does turn off. There are ways you could keep this Edge running in spite of the terminal being turned off. You could turn this into a service such that every time you turn the machine on, the Edge starts running automatically. All that can be done. We're not going to do it today. So now I want you to go and click on the link and log in with the same credentials as you did with the platform. Log in. And now you would be looking at the Edge environment. Now, the next tab you might remember is your platform environment. And if you look at the platform environment, you see components on the left and components down here. If you look at the Edge environment, you see components on the left and components down here. Looks very similar. Now let's look at a couple of things. It says here I have 0 services, 0 collections, 0 users. I've got 0 of most everything, but I need some of these components to be available on the Edge that are available in the platform. For example, that Python code that's going to run on the Edge, it's going to connect to the MQTT broker on the Edge and authenticate as device 1. Well, the Edge knows nothing about device 1 right now. In fact, it knows nothing about any device. So I need to change that, and I need to change a few other things. That's where I need a deployment. So I'm going to go back to my platform tab, and then I'm going to go to deploy, and I'm going to add a deployment, and I will call this first Edge deployment. It doesn't really matter what the name, let's just call it something. Create deployment. And I'm going to maximize my screen. So what are we going to deploy? Meaning, what are the components in the platform are we going to make available to the Edge? Well, we already said we want the Edge to know about devices. So click on here. And what we're going to do is to sync to Edge. That means if we make changes to devices in the devices table in the platform, those changes automatically filter down to the Edge, sync to Edge. Same with adapters. If I make any changes to that adapter on the platform, I want that to go down to the Edge, sync to Edge. Services. We need one service running. Remember, the Python code is going to publish to an MQTT topic hosted by the MQTT broker on the Edge. Well, who is subscribing to that topic? It is this log temperatures stream service, and we need it to run on the Edge because that's where the topic is going to be. So sync that to the Edge as well. We don't have any libraries, we don't have any shared caches, but we do have a collection. This stream service, when it starts running on the Edge, what does it do? It stores data to a collection. Where is that collection going to be? It's going to be on the Edge. But here's what we need. We need that data on the collection on the Edge to make its way up to the platform as it's written. So there we need to sync to platform, the opposite direction. Hopefully that makes sense. We don't have any users or portals that we're going to sync right now. If you wanted to have a portal served from the web server on the console, then you can deploy the portal. We're not going to do that today. And then you would need to deploy the user. But all of this gets deployed to first Edge. So definitely check this. And if you had multiple edges you wanted to deploy that to, you need to choose all of them. And if you had slightly different combinations of components you wanted to deploy to different edges, then you would need more than one deployment. Now hit save and exit. Now go back to your Edge view, the tab where you're looking at the Edge, and no services, right click, reload, and now you do see one service, one collection, and you see one device. Now let's go into services. Let's find your log temperature service, go to the advanced tab, refresh this and see no currently running instances. We need an instance running. So go back to code editor, save and test, go back to advanced and refresh. Perfect. We have one instance running. It's ready to receive the data. And now let's go ahead and look at our portal, and we need to run our Python code. Well, we're going to run it in a kind of a brute force way. I want you to open up another terminal. I'm going to do that here. And I want you to ls in that same directory where you deployed your Edge, and you'll see an adapters folder. I'm going to go into that adapters folder. And in there, I have temperature adapter. I'm going to go in there. And in there, I have my Python file. Perfect. I'm going to type in Python 3, temperature adapter. And as soon as I start running this, hopefully you will see data starts flowing into your widget in your portal. So what's happening? That Python code is connected as an MQTT client on the edge to the MQTT broker on the edge. It's publishing to a topic, and there's a stream service running on the edge subscribing to the same topic. That stream service is writing to a collection on the edge, but that collection on the edge is synced up to the platform, and the collection on the platform happens to be the data source for this widget in our portal. Hopefully that was useful. At this point, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourselves. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask me. So hopefully that showed that deploying the ClearBlade Edge is, in my opinion, fairly painless, and you get a lot out of it. Now, that gateway device can run autonomously, and if there's a network disconnection, well, guess what? All that data gets collected in the collection on the edge, and when the network connection is reestablished, that data gets synced up, and you don't have a catastrophic crash. Obviously, if the network is down for an extremely long time, it is possible that you fill up all the space that you have on the device, that one collection takes up a lot of space, but that is something that should be extremely unlikely. You don't want a situation where a network connection is down for that long, obviously.